So we are now recording this session. I'd like to say this August 1st webinar is under Cheltenham House rules, so you cannot attribute comments to individual speakers. The views expressed in this webinar are those of the speakers. They're not necessarily the views of Continental, of FRAND Avenue, of CMS, of Oxford, of its affiliates, of myself, and all of us, we reserve the right to change our opinions in due course and to have the freedom of thought to express ideas and to see perhaps over time, shorter or longer, that we don't think like that anymore. So with all of that being said, these are big news, basically. I mean, Europe has started to create a new framework for standard essential patents, is about to pass a new regulation on FRAND and made its points in the world history. What is your take on that? In a few seconds, are you excited about that? Do you think this will help the standard essential patents community? Do you think it will provide further smoothness of transactions? Or what is synergist, your key takeaway from this move coming from Brussels last week?
So, Roya, do you want me to start?
Yes, please, Cyril.
Okay. Well, let me give you my first impression. We all have seen this proposal from the Commission coming out a bit out of the blue. It wasn't out of the blue for a number of people that the Commission had consulted before, but the extent at which the Commission intended to regulate, to propose a regulation, was, I believe, surprising, at least for me. My first reaction was that it was clearly heavy-handed. The Commission proposes to go quite far in the regulation of this market, and pretty much one-sided. I don't have the impression that the voice of the patent owners has been really understood. Their opinion doesn't seem to be taken into consideration in this draft regulation, although the final draft is a bit better in this respect than the initial leaked out project. But that's my first reaction. When I reviewed this draft a bit further down, and I see a few shortcomings in the analysis. First, nowhere in the impact assessment report the fact that the FRAND undertakings for the SSOs which do have a FRAND undertaking, not all of them have, but at least for all undertakings made before ETSI, which represent the vast majority of the issues at stake. The Commission and the assessment report have not taken into consideration the legal consequences of these undertakings. The ETSI undertaking happened to be made under French law, and under French law, that undertaking creates an agreement between the SCP owner and the licensee, the willing licensee. There is no doubt that there is disagreement, and that disagreement will be, in a way, will be impacted by this new framework. But the agreement will remain, and that's the free will of the parties. And that agreement will need to be, to work within the new framework if it really enters into effect. So that's my first, comment. The second thing that I have seen, this regulation and the impact assessment report doesn't seem to have noticed that most of the missions that would be entrusted to the Competence Centre with the EU IPO are already available in the market. There are electronic registrars of standard essential patent declarations. FRAND Avenue is one of them. And we make available all information that is available otherwise at Etsy level, and we make it available for free. There are more sophisticated search tools which are made available by us and by others. We also offer a system for assessment of essentiality. The draft proposal doesn't invent anything in that. We offer it with, simply allowing the stakeholders to disclose to each other the necessary information to appreciate the essentiality level.
Okay.
And other features. So that's my first reaction. It's funny because they are trying to make mandatory things which already exist. And the way the Commission will make it working with the Competence Centre remains to be seen, of course.
Thank you. Roderick, what is your first reaction on draft regulation?
Thanks, Roya, for inviting me. I'm very glad to be here. And more than anything, I'm really happy that there are quite a few people who've joined who are watching, because I'm convinced that this sort of a legislative effort, the more input from stakeholders there is, the better the result will be. Incidentally, I just want to repeat, these are my views, not necessarily the view of Continental. And I'd kind of like to take a step back and explain why I'm glad that there's this proposal. I'm glad that things are happening, because I think, I've heard people say, we don't need to do anything. There's not a problem. And always those people have been in the telecommunications business for a long time. And here I can do a comparison, in the automotive industry. Back in 1915, standardization in the automotive industry started. And there was a meeting of the standardization organization. A certain Henry Ford was deputy chairman. And this went on for more than a century. I haven't heard much about problems with standard essential patents in the automotive industry. And I think this shows when it's in the industry and people have a lot of expertise, they have competence, they have experience, then we don't have an issue. But when I look at what the proposal wants to do in the introduction, they want to help the IoT move out to incentivize participation by European firms, particularly in IoT industries. And I know from my own conversations with customers who are looking to bring this in aftermarket products, fleet products for trucks, for example. And a conversation will be, we've got this existing product that has connectivity. We'd like to upgrade it, and we think an innovative new product that uses LTE would be good. It'll be future-proof. And Continental, you have this product that you can supply to us, but how much is the license going to cost? And I have to say, I don't know. And how is it? Can you guarantee that no one's going to sue us? And I have to say, no, I can't guarantee that. That you can see that Continental has been involved in litigation, as have most players in the telecommunications market. And so these companies, then they say things like, well, maybe it's a bit early. And I think that's a real shame for European innovation, that you have a whole new world of devices, Internet of Things. And here, automobiles are just one of these devices. You've got medical devices, you've got construction equipment, all kinds of devices that could benefit from connectivity. And I see the current situation as a real drag. So that's why I think it's important that we now have this proposal. And you can find details that aren't so good. I think Cyril has identified some issues that Cyril has, but as it's, and again, an excerpt from the proposed regulation, that standardization produced significant positive economic effects. But they also note that by including patented technology in the standard, the SEP holder has a strong economic position vis-a-vis potential implementers, because the implementers, they can't work around these patents. And so I also think it's interesting to discuss and consider, the different options that the Commission said they looked at, including voluntary guidance, a register with essentiality checks and a FRAND determination procedure, an aggregate royalty calculation for these SEPs. They even proposed an SEP clearinghouse. And customers that I've talked to that maybe sell a few thousand units a year, what if I imagine, I'm going to come up with a connected flower pot, and I'm going to add some LTE capability in my flower pot. I'd love to be able to go to a SEP clearinghouse and I pay my $5 or whatever it is to get this licenses to use connectivity. And then I know I can start my business with a connected flower pot. Now, as it turned out, the European Commission decided that this SEP clearinghouse, which I think would be great for small companies that aren't in the business of telecommunications, I guess they decided that went too far. But they do choose this voluntary guidance and the register and FRAND determination and aggregate royalty calculations. And as they point out, this obligatory pre-trial conciliation is going to reduce SEP dispute settlement costs to 1/8 of what they'd be otherwise. So I think the objectives, if we keep those in mind, then we can have real productive conversations. Does this proposal do the best possible job of getting to those objectives? Or do we have a better solution? Something that'll also perhaps even faster get to these objectives. So that's what I wanted to say as an introduction. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Toby, with your experience as a patent litigator, what's your take on the draft regulation?
So to be completely honest, when the leaked one came through, I was in the US and I was talking with clients about what the implications of this might be. And obviously in the UK, we're slightly unique, slightly outside of this new potential system. And I should say, obviously at the beginning, that I come at this completely agenda-free. I don't have strong leanings one way or the other. And my initial reaction was, why do we have to have another layer of bureaucracy? Particularly as you dig into it, finding that it's non-binding, all those sorts of things, it's just going to lead potentially to games. But then the more I read it, and obviously there's a 78-page policy document, there's a 258-page impact assessment, there's a lot of material here. They've obviously done a huge amount of work. The more I read into it, the more I realized that they actually have put an awful lot of thought into this. And I think there are two buckets, and Roderick touched on this earlier, that I think we do have to think about. The first is, from a moral's the wrong word, but from a theoretical perspective, is this a good thing? Is the idea of this, is the belief behind this a good, are there good intentions here? And I actually fundamentally think that the answer is yes to that. I think exactly again, as Roderick discussed earlier, in the spheres of excellence, so in the telecom spheres, the big players who are doing licensing, that perhaps would argue that the system isn't broken, that the vast majority of deals are done without any need for recourse to litigation, which is obviously what everyone wants, other than perhaps me. But they would say the system isn't broken, but this isn't targeted at them. This is targeted at the micro, small, medium-sized enterprise companies, the ones who are trying to get into the Internet of Things, that are really struggling because they just don't know what their potential liability is. So that's the first bucket. So my initial impression, not so hot, but is warming. Then you really have to have the secondary bucket, which is their proposal actually feasible, and is what they've proposed, does it make logical sense? And in parts, yes, and in other parts, I think they're going to really struggle. The cost of setting this up, for one, is going to be large. There's no indication yet, other than some very approximate figures, as to what the costs of these things are going to be. There seem to be some severe imbalances in places. I don't know whether, Roy, you want to come back to that, but I'm happy to touch on a few. I know Cyril obviously quite rightly notified a few things, but the essentiality checks and the potential determination of conciliation and aggregate royalty, the experts that they're going to have to find, question mark again how they find them, they're said to have to be completely independent. And I think there is even a line in here that goes even further than that, to say that their independence is beyond doubt. Now, I mean, question mark how they're going to identify those people, particularly given we've just set up the UPC, which arguably is a forum that it would be appropriate to make these sorts of determinations, that have identified and found technical expertise for the technical judges. So there's lots of different things there. I think one thing that we have to bear in mind is a lot of these determinations are non-binding. There's also carve-outs for particular sectors. So it could well be 4G, it could be LTE, and there are carve-outs that say that this won't apply to them. So in circumstances where the market is functioning, this won't need to apply. So they haven't ironed out those details yet, but it's not this. It doesn't appear actually when you dig into it that it's this all or nothing. On its face, it only applies to standards being finalised post this coming into force, so not retroactively. Although it does have the ability in the language to pull some of those in if they are not functioning properly. So it does seem to actually have been quite well thought through and slightly more balanced than I had initially anticipated it being. I had thought, as Cyril has alluded to before, that it might be very, very implementer focused, implementer positive, and it is. That is a reality of it, particularly on the cost side. But it is slightly more nuanced than that and slightly more balanced than that. So that's a long way of saying I was cold to start off with, and I've warmed up to the idea, Roy.
Wow, thank you very much. I thought it would be an elevator pitch. If you ever take the elevator at IBM in the Watson Tower in Munich, the elevator takes you 5 seconds to go completely up. You wouldn't stand a chance in an elevator pitch. But it was obviously very interesting to hear. What your take is. I'd like to now stop the recording.